You found product market fit, but now the systems are cracking. The team needs you for everything. Growth feels like quicksand. The more you move, the deeper it pulls you in. This is the scaling paradox, where founders and operators come to get unstuck. I'm Blake Moseni, and I sit down with founders and operators that nearly burnt out and rebuilt their business to operate without them. If you're stuck in the middle, this is where we fix it.
I place reputation over revenue any day of the week. Most agencies start off with some type of individual or very small group of people that know the sauce. The difficulty is when you have so many people, the sauce starts getting diluted. One of our biggest fumbles involved a brand whose silent partner, his name is Harley Finkelstein, who happens to be the president of Shopify.
Welcome to another episode of The Scaling Paradox. I am so excited to have Dee Dang on to talk about so many spectacular things in today's episode. We're going to be digging into things like the comm scaling framework and how Dee has applied that throughout the entirety of his career. Now, before we get into any details on who Dee is and what he's been able to accomplish thus far in his career, I do want to give a little background on what he's accomplished thus far. And so Dee is the co-founder and CEO of RightHook, a performance growth agency that's scaling 7- and 8-figure D2C brands. And that is a 2x Australian Financial Review Fast 100 company. I did have to look up what AFR stands for. That said, after scaling fast and hitting hard leadership lessons, now he helps founders lead with clarity, calm, and real operational control. And ultimately, his mission is to help you become a better boss without burning out your team along the way. Dee, I'm so excited to have you on, man.
Appreciate it, man. Man, I think I just got inspiration from my new Twitter bio. Right
there. There you go. I'll send it your direction. I'll send you direction. You can repurpose it.
I got the sauce. So excited to be here.
Yeah, super excited for the listeners to have an opportunity to hear about what you've experienced thus far. And we'll talk a little bit about the tweet that got us to this conversation and triggered the whole notion around comm scaling. But before we do, I think it would be awesome for you to lay out for the listeners, give your Shark Tank bio on what RightHook is and what your kind of growth path has been up until the point you are today.
Yeah. So we started off RightHook works with D2C brands, and we started off in 2016, 2017 as your run-of-the-mill, we'll run your Facebook ads agency.
Sure.
I think anyone who's been in the game for a minute, especially between 2014 to 17, know that back then, effectively, if you knew the interface and you knew what buttons to push and you had something to sell, almost anything to sell, you were essentially, you found a money printing machine for a bit. And you know, during that time, I started off with my co-founder, and we were, should we do lead gen? Should we do info? Should we do SaaS? Should we do e-commerce? What are we doing? And so we tried a bit of everything. And eventually just landed on, let's just knuckle down and focus on D2C and e-commerce, and started sharing in different types of Facebook groups and forums and stuff like that. And I think that's what got me noticed, and that's also what got me on like stages like Affiliate World and speaking on different places. And then 2020, not only did COVID hit, iOS 14 hit, and that just messed around a whole bunch of performance marketers for a whole bunch of different reasons.
Sure.
And that began the evolution of our agency from, we'll just run your Facebook ads, to, oh, we really need to start thinking about how we can be a growth agency now, because running Facebook ads just isn't as effective. You know, like God mode was switched off, like someone just switched flicked that switch off. And COVID was really kind of D2C. By 2023, we had 120 employees. We had a few claim to fame moments, like, you know, making 1.4 mil for a streetwear brand in 30 minutes.
Wow.
For a launch. Yeah, for a launch. I think the day ended up with something like, you know, 2 mil plus. But yeah, 120 employees. And then November 2022 also was when this thing called ChatGPT came out. And I
Hmm.
was like, holy crap, what the heck is going on? Where's this leading? So we had to do a lot of soul searching, and through that hard scaling, stuff just started to the wheels just started to fall off a little bit, right?
Hmm.
They started getting a little wobbly. So right now we're at like 60 staff,
Sure.
around the same count in terms of clientele, and just figuring out what the game looks like moving forward with the advent of AI.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, man, that's kind of like the Cliff Notes version, but not so Cliff Notes at the same time.
No, I appreciate the breakdown, and I think it's good context for the listeners to know, like peaking at 120, coming down to about 60. That is where things
120 was
stabilize.
hard, bro.
I guess that's really where I want to go. Is where what was breaking that triggered you guys to say, okay, this isn't working. We need to reevaluate things.
Um, I place I place reputation over revenue any day of the week,
Hmm.
and there were. It's one of those things, right, where typically you start off, or most agencies start off with some type of individual or very small group of people that know the sauce.
Sure.
The difficulty is when you have so many people, the sauce starts getting diluted. Or
Hmm.
if you're not on top of it, you start diluting the sauce. So restaurant number one, great quality. Restaurant
Hmm.
number two, lesser quality. And if you start
Sure.
franchising too early or just expanding your restaurants, before you know it, it's unrecognizable, and you start getting complaints
Mm.
around how the meals aren't similar, or the quality's gone down, or someone just kind of wrapped the burger up really, like, just subpar and just threw it at a customer. So we're noticing stuff like that. Um, Biggest fumble. I'm happy to share this because I will. It's a it's a badge I'll wear. It's a badge of embarrassment that I'll wear publicly.
Sure.
One of her biggest fumbles involved a brand whose silent partner, not so silent partner, um, his name is Harley Finkelstein, who
Hmm.
happens to be the president of Shopify. And I'm like, yo,
Whoo.
we really fumbled. Like we really
Hmm.
fumbled, right? So it's stuff like that that made me then go, okay, well, who are we? What do we actually stand for? And what can we actually do? Right? What can
Hmm.
we actually deliver on? Not all the contents of the stuff that we do, but what can we actually like? If you come to this, I'm jumping around with analogies here, but if you come to this boxing gym, can you actually become a world champion, or do you just get
Sure.
boxing lessons?
Hmm.
Right? And I think by the time we got to 120, we were just dishing out boxing lessons, not necessarily the world champ. Like, the outsized results and returns started going like, wait, where is it? What's going on? So there was a bit of that, and a lot of middle management. I think the executive layer had to figure out where they stood relative to middle managers, because
Hmm.
for the longest time we were the middle managers.
Sure.
So I think there was a bit of identity crisis there as well. So yeah, just like systems broke, results became a lot less repeatable, and people became harder, seemingly, to manage, to lead, to keep on track, and a bunch of mishires also.
So this is really interesting, and there's some other pieces I want to get to in the com scaling framework, but I really want to dig into this particular portion for the listeners to get some tactical insights on what and where they could take action from what you've called out. It's There were a lot of headwinds. You're seeing all sorts of pain points coming up that are basically, well, that's being reflected in customer pain. That's being reflected in the potency of the value that's being delivered, not necessarily showing up over and over again. And so,
Yup.
how do you go? How do you go about dialing that back? And so you talked about going from 120 to 60, so 60% reduction in force. I'm sure there are a multitude of factors that facilitated that, but does right now feel like the right size is maybe the question for the client base that you're servicing, and if yes, how did you find that right size for other organizations to learn from?
Right. Right. Um, the Well, first of all, when you start when you're at 120 people and you start making fumbles like that, like churn just comes knocking on your door anyways.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's
yeah.
that, right? There's
Hmm.
that for sure, and then which then means P&L pressures also. But it's so we had to do a bit of soul searching too to go like, okay, well, there are some executive decisions to be made here. Do you hold on to the head count, trust the pipe, like just trust the pipeline, and then fill that head count back up again because we're a service
Sure.
business, or do you start leaning down? That's number one. So just from a purely financial perspective and lens, how do we approach that? Now, there's a
Hmm.
secondary portion, which I think, for me at least, was a lot more to correct, which was the cultural reset that I needed to have.
Mm.
Because when you when those things were allowed to happen, I mean, I firmly believe this. You deserve exactly what you tolerate, and we
Hmm.
were tolerating a lot, right? Not even for a multitude of reasons, but as an organization, we were signaling out to everyone else in the organization, uh, there are no hard internal consequences if you fumble the ball enough times across the
Hmm.
entire organization,
Hmm.
from people executing all the way through to people managing and the people just running the show. So that needed a reset in various different types of ways, and that, in my mind, I firmly believed I needed to correct, because if I corrected that, I truly believe that the reputation and revenue would come,
Sure.
right? Um, or at least like to be for us to be able to hit our goals and our targets for being able to grow this firm. Now, to answer your question around does this feel like the right size now, it almost is independent of yes, the number. Short answer is yes, that number feels like we're at that right point. We can afford, and in fact, with buffer to hire a bit more on the execution side because our management team also, I guess, which leads me to the second part. The team just feels right. Like,
Mm.
people are showing up. I'm having strategists who are in their own right came to Right Hook already with a wealth of experience. I'm having these guys and gals show up in a public internal Slack channel, share a recording of a call they had with a prospect or a client or whoever it might be, and then go roast me. And
Hmm.
this iron sharpened iron. I'm no smarter than anyone else here, but I'm open to critiquing and I'm hungry for that critique all the time. That part, super exciting, super exciting. Like the our one of our core values is Kaizen, if essentially the need for continuous improvement. And the difficult thing about continuous improvement and the true sense of Kaizen is it comes along with just this low vibration hum in the background of feeling like you're never enough.
Hmm.
And you kind of got to be able to know how to temper that, because
Hmm.
that's how professional athletes feel, right? So anyway, point being, uh, I was a lot more honed into the quality of the people, as much as, if not just slightly above, the quantity of the people.
I think that's such a potent call out. I actually had a podcast with Jay Dolwani about a couple weeks ago, and he runs the Starters. It's an ecom focused specific fractional freelance work company, and I feel as though he called out something similar, which is this whole notion that the best like it's better to fill a room with some of the best players, even if they are only allocating a certain portion of time than try to fill a room with a bunch of bodies, which I think most people know, but I don't know how many people actually practice. And one of the things that you called out that I'm most interested in understanding specifically for the listeners is how do you go about recalibrating that culture, you know? So like you're at 120, obviously you have P&L pressures. You like, it's easy to say these people are the non-performers. Let's go ahead and move them out. But there's probably some people that were in mid tier or kind of performing that you also had to make some tough decisions on. And so how do you go about shifting that behavior of the organization so that you are getting that iron is sharpening iron and you're getting that continuous improvement mindset established within the business?
Yeah, for sure. Um, when I was younger in my career, I would I constantly tried in my career here at Right Hook, I constantly my go-to way of trying to address stuff like that was always like one to many. So it'd be like a town
Sure.
hall, or it'd be like a company memo, or it'd be some type of thing like that, right? Some type of thing that you would see other big time CEOs do. And then I kind of sat there and went, this is absolutely stupid. You're not a Jeff Bezos with some internal memo, Amazon letter to shareholders. You don't have thousands of people. You've got like
Sure.
dozens, right? So I changed my approach and went, you know what? Let's just find one. So my lowest hanging fruit, most I don't know most inclined to lean into this change, not only in terms of willingness from a like a lip service standpoint, but they'll actually go away and like follow through and do it, right?
Sure.
And then champion that. So it almost became a bit like a viral spread. Just infect one and get that one to be an internal advocate or ambassador for that thing. Now you've got two, that person and me. And then our next mission is to go find one more, and now you split that cell again, and now it becomes four, and then go that way. I found that to be more effective because the touch time is so much more intimate, and a like a mentor, like a coach and performer relationship starts to form rather than this. Oh, I saw the memo, or I'm at the town hall. I'll nod along, but then the follow through isn't possible because it's one person trying to convince like a huge group of people.
You know what I really appreciate about what you just brought up, and I like to always take things up to like the higher level and look at the broader systems. I'm a systems guy. It's
Hell
just
yeah.
like how I operate. But
Hell
if
yeah.
you look at the hardware of a human being and the biology, and I think it's Dunbar's number or something like that, where you have like
Mm-hmm.
120 or so people that you can interact with at scale. What you've tapped into is the biology of tribe mentality, and the change management cycle that instantiates more effective change within the business. And so, as you called out, that notion of I'm going to go to someone, and I'm specifically calling this out for the listeners so you guys have a framework to think about. You want to look for someone that has high engagement. So someone that you know is interested in said problem or whatever you're trying to accomplish. You also want to look for someone that has high influence, because you can have someone that's highly engaged and delivers, but if they don't have influence, their ability to infect, like you said, like a virus to the rest of the group is lower. And so by taking that approach and bringing on additional leaders, not even followers at that point. It's like additional leaders to champion that out. It enables the more effective spread. And if you look at human behavior, at the beginning, there's always a couple people that are starting to do the dance, doing some exploration with ChatGPT and talking about it. Next thing you know, everyone's talking about it because the super users at the top, or the people that have influence, are the ones that are cascading that down, right? And so
Yeah.
and so I think that's a really potent way that you've described that, and so important for any company that's trying to recalibrate not just the culture, but also any change that you want to establish within the business. Like if you're trying to be more tech forward, like you got to take that same sort of methodology. There is a science to the change management behind it.
And I'd add to that too, the 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 high influence part can be synthesized also. So most of, well, context, we're a remote company. So it's not even like I can just drag a bunch of people at the office and be like, yo, so and so's doing a little lunch and learn thing based off of what
Mm-hmm.
we just did. Everyone come on in, grab your food, we'll do a thing. So we can't really do it like that. Um, the influence thing can be synthesized because a lot of, like a lot of my strategists for the most part tend to be more introverted, reserved, don't like to big note themselves in front of everyone. I just want to do my own thing, do it well, and just like leave it like that, right? I feel really awkward when I get compliments.
Yeah.
That's for the most part a good way to describe the average person at Right Hook, at least strategists. Now, uh, so what I did instead was to go, hey, do you mind sharing that? Like, it'll be a DM between us, and I'll do,
Mm.
it'll be a roast thing, or it would be some type of attempt that they made, where re- regardless of whether they had a positive or negative outcome, we were putting them forward as hypothesis and findings from the experiment. Finding like so always
Mm.
is that. And I just go, hey man, do you mind just sharing that in our learnings channel or another channel like that? Uh, and they'd be like, oh, I don't know, like this feels kind of like private. I don't know if they'll want to. I don't want to waste other people's time by sharing stuff like that. And I go, dude, just do it. I'll back
Mm-hmm.
you up.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be them posting it, and I would just light up the thread underneath to be like, yo, man, really love that you did this. I learned this from that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm going to steal some things that I learned from this attempt that you just made as well. And then I'll
Mm.
mention a bunch of people and be like, yo, what do y'all think? So that
Mm.
borrowed influence of, oh, the CEO is kind of in there also, giving
Mm.
flowers to this one person and continuing to do that. I was able to kind of share the spotlight, so to speak, of influence with someone who
Mm-hmm.
might not be as influential from a company position standpoint or just even from an actual like social dynamic standpoint. So, and what I would do also was get my other managers to jump in and be like, yo, this person's about to share this. Once they
Mm-hmm.
share it, jump into the thread and kind of give your take on it too.
You know, the other piece that I appreciate about it, and I'm going to ask you in a second around where you learned some of this stuff because you are reading out of a change management textbook based off the way that you're describing this sort of stuff, is recognition is such an important key in all of this and a fulcrum of boosting the outcome. So I would say that's the third thing out of the list that we've kind of talked about thus far. It's like high level of engagement, the influence, but also recognizing people and building a platform so people
Yeah.
want to aspire towards that because that is so motivating for so many people, even if it's not their MO. It's an important part of it. And I think one other piece that I would add to that list as a consideration and as you're building adoption within your organization is really understanding what do your people like and appreciate. So if they are being put up on a pedestal and being recognized, like how are we also rewarding some of those behaviors as well too outside of just those type of activities? Or do they like monetary compensation? Everyone likes money, but some people aren't motivated by it. Some people just want a meal. Like what are those type of activities that also can be put in place to continue to perpetuate the behavior over time?
100%. 100%. Like getting into, and to kind of preempt you asking the question, in in 2022, I started, I saw the head count growing, and I'm going like, we are, and we did the whole like EOS traction thing, we did the
Mm-hmm.
Gazelle scaling up thing, and tried to find a framework that worked for our business type and our business size, and also like just our business as its own unique organism, right? The cultural nuance and all that.
Sure.
And just struggled to, as tool rich and as framework rich as they are, just struggled to have it stick for whatever reason. So I continued my search to go look for frameworks and answers, and stumbled across the Lean Institute, which is all about like Toyota management and Toyota
Mm-hmm.
management principles, and all that. I guess the forefather to Agile in some ways. So I reached out and I said, "Hey, what are you guys about? And can I get some coaching and all that?" Managed to have the president of Lean as my coach, as my assigned coach, which is like super awesome.
What was the
And just
company
got
called
taught a
again?
whole.
You cut out for a
So it's
second.
called the Lean. It's called the Lean Institute.
Okay, yeah,
So
I've heard
LEI,
of Lean
the
Institute.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, the Lean Enterprise Institute. And as much as their primary clientele and their primary audience are manufacturing firms because it got birthed out of Toyota, I think that's where I learned my most impactful lessons, and also, you know, they provided frameworks that we still use actively up till this day,
yeah.
because it provides the 100,000 foot view, the 10,000 foot view, but then also the ground floor view,
Mm-hmm.
and tactics too, right? So it
Sure.
really is very first principles based, but there are a bunch of tactics too. It's just really unsexy for
Mm-hmm.
the your run of the mill entrepreneur. Has nothing to do with scaling or like sales calls or
Mm-hmm.
getting more leads or anything like that.
It's funny though. If you cut through, because there's so much content out there, there are specific, what I'll call like immutable truths across different things like strategy, across sales, across managing organizations, and everyone's coming up with their own repackaged version of it over and over again. And I think it's funny. So I'm a lean guy through and through. I've practiced and rolled that out across all sorts of enterprise throughout my career. And what I think is so interesting about it is, to your point, some of it's not sexy. Some of it's like, here's a piece of paper, write the data on this piece of paper, and just manage how the performance is looking, you know? And
Totally.
and you're like, are you kidding me? Like, we're living in the age of AI. But here's the interesting thing about it. These are systems and frameworks that have worked for close to 100 years. Like, we're actually, I would say, if we look at industrial revolution time frame with the advent of Toyota, everything else, like right around that 100 year, just over 100 year marker of these type of structures and systems performing. And not to say that there aren't new pieces of technology to advance those things, but if something is foundationally working and is consistently getting results across not just manufacturing, but a whole multitude of different enterprises, like, kudos to you for you exploring something that is not the quote unquote sexy thing to bring into your business.
Yeah, for sure. It was I mean, like the 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 amount what was really a pleasant surprise was the sheer volume of tools that came out of my experience with lean, that addressed people management too, that addressed
Mm-hmm.
people development, that addressed
Mm-hmm.
like all that type of stuff, like just the A3 problem solving framework in itself,
Sure.
or like Mike Rother's improvement kata in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So much of that has, as much as it is process driven in a lot of ways, it answers a lot of how do we develop our people and continually improve our workforce type questions also.
Absolutely. Well, it ties so much to the basis of how do you transfer knowledge and create repeatable systems at scale, because that's ultimately what it comes down to, and you called it out before. It's how do you make, and I'm going to go back to your analogy, how do you make the restaurant taste the same, whether it's in Australia all the way through to whether it's in Chicago, Illinois, like it. And the masters of that are like the McDonald's and the Domino's of the world, that, like, no matter where you go in the world, the brand just represents some level of consistent value delivery. Like, a burger in Chicago is pretty much going to taste the same as a burger in Beijing. And
Yeah.
so and so I think that process piece is so overlooked, and I think this is a really good transition into the whole notion of comm scaling, and how you've approached utilizing that. And I'm sure there's been some basis of lean kind of tied into some of that narrative. But before we do that, I want to read the tweet that got us on this call together. That triggered me to reach out and see and share all the sauce that you got for the audience that's listening in. So I'm gonna read it off. Most people think that scaling equals more chaos. I used to have that same belief. I'd see successful entrepreneurs talking about how they have a dozen different things happening. And I think to myself, wow, successful scaling comes with a hectic life. Ship like crazy, always high output, no excuses. That's just how it is. So what did I do with that? And I worked with it. And initiatives were shipping like crazy. And we were moving fast, and there was a huge amount of pipeline. We were pumping out all sorts of things, and profits were on the way up. But then the inevitable happened. I burned myself out. This led to feeling guilty for allowing myself to get burnt out, and I never told anyone that I was burnt out, but it was as plain as day. My performance was in a downward spiral. And give me 1 second, I need to pause. It's during this time that I was introduced to the concept of calm scaling. So that is part of a much longer tweet, and I did paraphrase in a couple different spots. But really, what you're getting to is this whole notion of you've lived through this, and we've already spent the last 20 or so minutes kind of talking through what that has meant to you in your business. It would be really great to understand what the concept of calm scaling is and how you introduce that into your broader business and help work you through some of the most difficult times of burnout that you've lived through.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone who um, has been or knows of a gym bro can kind of relate, right? So, there are the dudes that go into the gym, and every session is just they're just trying to like kill themselves, just lift as heavy as possible. It's all singles and triples. Um, and then, they'll come back into the gym half limping and kind of sore. And they're like, hey, bro, and I'll go be like, hey, man, so what are you training today? It's like, oh, I don't know, man. Monday was super tough. I'll just do whatever I can. And it's this starter start. Like, they'll go super hard, they'll injure themselves, and they have to lay off for a little bit, and they'll go super hard again. I'm like, you're kind of stuck in a pattern. That was the pattern that I was stuck in when it came to like, I took that same gym bro approach. It's pretty much just like Chad scaling effectively.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Right. Uh, and that burnout became a cycle. And I go, wait a second here. There's something that doesn't seem right. How do these people stay always on? Like, I'm looking on social media, I'm reading their books, I'm watching their YouTubes, and they seem like they're always on. And I was looking at the personality and kind of extrapolating out this is more likely than not how they live their lives and how they make their decisions based off of my read of their personality. The whole notion of calm scaling is effectively another way to put it, which is a term I tend to use a bit more outside of the purpose of the tweet, is like flow scaling. Like, where do you find flow? For those individuals, it just so happens that they find flow in that type of mode. Like, that's their mode, right? Whereas certain others, they have a different mode. So it really is one of, I don't know, like self-awareness, soul searching, whatever you want to call it, to go, what is your mode? And then secondarily to that, what is your organization's mode? Again, because each organization is so unique in its own way, because it's just a collection and a network of different individuals working together. And that's why the cultural reset had to happen, because if there's no cultural strength tying everything together, you're just herding cats, right? So effectively, flow scaling is, and I will butcher the heck out of his last name, but Mihail Chikos, I forget his last. Anyway, the flow state guy who wrote the flow state book.
Yeah.
Right, where effectively, if you Google flow state, and you'll see this graphic on Google Images where there's a thin band in the middle where you stay in flow state. Anything below that, you move into the realm of boredom. Anything above that, you move into the realm of like distress. Right. So I was always in that distress mode of like, yo, I'm always just like, my cortisol just through the roof. Like, what the hell's going
Yeah.
on? So finding that flow so that I could go back to the gym every single day, train, get that pump, leave, not get injured, because the goal is to go back the following week as healthy as this week. So my approach to work is like that too, where yes, we have aggressive goals. We want to set that stretch. We want to have the BHAG, all that conventional wisdom stuff. But what is the pace, right? How do we pace ourselves to get there? And what is the pace that the entity can thrive in? So for some, it's sprint and then just a little lull, sprint and a little lull. For some others, it's marathon, just super steady the whole way through with short bursts of like pushing just a little bit harder, but it's an always on type of a thing. So just really understanding what that pacing is and where that flow lies for the individual, but then also for the larger group that they belong to, I've found to be okay. There's something here, right? And that's how we managed to flow through 120 people down to 60, experiencing the churn in the middle, getting back to that same type of level again, all that.
I appreciate the call out of aligning the two entities, and I'm gonna have some other conversations around what that alignment looks like. But for the founders or the leaders that are listening to this podcast, how can they go about calibrating or identifying what their own level of intensity is, or what their own version of flow is, where they're not in super high cortisol or just twiddling their thumbs, wondering what the next thing is they're going to do.
Yeah. I'm
And
gonna
I guess
try to be,
I'm going to interject one more. Sorry to call this out.
of course.
What How did you do it for yourself is probably the best
Yes.
question, and then we can apply it to everybody else.
Yes, for sure. And I'm gonna try to be as not esoteric and woo-woo as possible with this.
Appreciate that.
The non-esoteric version is do a time and energy audit. That's the non-esoteric version, right? So for the next 2 weeks to a month, audit your time. Use a free tool like Toggle, Toggl, just to track your time and where it gets spent. So whenever you start doing a new thing, just turn it on. There's a Chrome extension. There's a phone app. There are ways that it's always convenient for you. Do that. Tag it against meeting, thinking time, execution time. Whatever big pillars or areas are. What I call like AORs, like areas of responsibility in your life, right?
Sure.
Whatever your AOR is, just tag it with that. And then after those 2 weeks, feel free to do it for 4 weeks if you want more data. You can look back and go like, oh, a lot of my time spent there. So that's the time audit part. The energy audit part is effectively looking at those activities, and it's more a real-time audit rather than a retrospective one. And going, did I walk away from this with an energy gain or an energy drain? Right? That's effectively it. And then there's a third part too, which is impact against outcomes. So for where I spend my time and my energy, how impactful is it relative to driving the desired outcome? Which might prompt people to go, whoa, wait a second. What is my desired outcome? So that's non-esoteric version. The esoteric version is I used to have a really bad anger problem, like real bad, right? Like I was in my head when I was younger, in my 20s, it was always the world is against D, so find some way to like hit back at that. And through my path, found just like Eastern philosophy and Eastern wisdom. Eventually gravitate towards Buddhism. And a lot of that, I guess the less esoteric version is just mindfulness, right? To be aware of where am I in this moment right now, in my thoughts, in my presence, and all that, to then go, which helped a lot with the energy audit part, because you're just so much more attuned to how does this make me feel, and can I pause for a minute to determine how am I going to respond to how this makes me feel, as opposed to it just being one unstoppable chain of an uncontrollable involuntary sequence. But yeah, like audit the time, audit the energy, and audit the impact towards outcomes. That's a really great way for any individual to start. Like we're so go go go. I think as entrepreneurs, and even if we're not entrepreneurs, anyone that perceives themselves to be a high performance individual, the default mode is go,
Hmm.
right? And what I think lean taught me, and what mindfulness taught me, and what my own experiences have taught me is, uh, but when do you stop and take stock? When do you, even athletes, it's super clean for them. They have a game, and then afterward they review the play-by-play of that game,
Mm.
sit down with the coach, the whole team is there, and they go, all right, well, this part we got to change, that part we got, like, when does that reflection happen? um, if you're in a professional franchise, your coach makes you do that.
Sure. Sure, sure,
But if
sure.
you're running your own business, or if you're on your own schedule, no one's going to make you do that. So
Hmm.
you kind of have to make yourself do that.
I really like the idea of the audit and then taking stock of the activities that you're executing against. It's almost like for those listeners that haven't done a time audit, but maybe you've measured how many calories you're taking in a day, and you're like, oh wow, I made a lot more sweets than I thought. Or you look at the screen time on your phone, and you're like, oh wow, I was on Instagram for an hour. Like I thought I was there for maybe 5-10 minutes throughout the entirety of the day. And
Right.
so I think data and information are the first step in awareness, and then it is set individuals responsibility to then make the choice as to where and how they want to action on that. And I appreciate the whole notion of mindfulness and reflection and baking that into the schedule. I think as we start to think about what you go and do with that, and I'm going to make some assumptions here. You could tell me if I'm off base. But
Hmm.
basically, it's the notion of you have the audit, the places that are draining your energy, you find a way to either deep delegate those type of activities down to someone else, or you try to minimize those impacts and say, do I even really want to be doing this type of work? An example would be if I'm working with a certain type of business or a certain type of industry, like if that's all draining your energy, do you either want to delegate or do you just want to cut that industry altogether and focus in on a different portion of the business? Is that kind of what it boils down to?
Yeah. Yeah. Relative to impact to the final pillar, which is that like impact portion, right? And the only reason why I bring that up is because if you are, if you're like year one, year two of running your business, and I'm assuming bootstrap service business, you're year one to year two, you are I don't know, like 250,000 a month in revenue. Um, for the most part, you're going to be wearing a lot of hats, and you're going to have
Sure.
to do, you're just going to have to brute force it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, guys and gals, but at that point, you can still apply these principles for sure, but there are going to be portions where you have to just like just
Suck it
strong man
up.
it through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
my game is now leverage, not brute force.
That makes a lot of sense. And as we start to think about the application of at the team level, so you talked about matching intensity and the scaling pace to the overall organization's pace. How do you go about measuring where your organization is at and the intensity that they're operating at?
Um, that comes down to, so what I a really helpful resource to just get into the right frame of mind. I mean, there are a bunch of them, but High Output Management by Andy Grove, former CEO
Okay.
of Intel. Great book. Great
Hmm.
book. Now, Management by Objectives, MBO, was kind of part of that too. Um, and High Output Management was kind of like the precursor to what now is like OKRs,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
So it's almost like reading like canonical stuff from like the forefathers that then got passed down to the OKR framework. Um,
Sure.
so effectively observe setting projects and observing time to output, right? So delivery as well as quality. So
Hmm.
time to delivery and quality of output as well is a really very obvious, explicit, and observable feedback loop to get data around the the pace of the organization and
Hmm.
how quickly we can move. For a while there, because of the 120, as the pen, we swung the pendulum too far the other way, where we became so process driven that we almost became blind to like being outcomes driven,
Sure, sure,
right?
sure,
And
sure. It's like
I
we're
think
we're
that
doing a
was,
bunch of activity. There's a lot of motion. Sorry, I'm jumping in,
yeah,
but the
yeah,
outcomes
for
aren't
sure.
actually showing up. And now, and it doesn't matter to do all this type of activity. It's like, excuse me, I go to the gym every single day and I'm lifting a bunch of weight, but if I'm not getting more shredded or whatever outcome I'm optimizing for, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. So we were trying to find a way to temper the activity, thinking that, okay, if we SOP this, or if we continue to refine process, and have some system framework, that for that repeatability, we're going to be able to drive that outcome. That was the predominant thought, that led to all that activity back then. And then I realized later, and also, communicated to the team, so that we realized that as a group later, is the eye on the prize must always be the outcome, and
Hmm.
the process being incidental to, because if we look at process first, outcome as a secondary, that's called a bureaucracy, right?
Hmm.
That's government. That's
Hmm.
stuff that really, as a small company, you don't have to be beholden to those things, where there are checks and balances and multiple approval levels and all that type.
Hmm.
So all we had to do was just go, guys, what are we actually doing here? Is
Hmm.
the goal to have the best process ever, or is the goal to have drive the best outcomes ever,
Hmm.
and have this be incidental to that, rather
Absolutely.
than this be primary, and assume that if we have great processes, the natural consequence is great outcome. To your analogy, just because you show up at the gym every day and you do the movements and follow a frame, like a method, if you're not obsessed, if you're satisfied with that and said that's good enough, the ripped body, or the strong, being stronger, is just going to come whenever, and it
Hmm.
doesn't come after 12 months, but you don't question the process, you're playing the wrong game. You're optimizing for the
Yep.
wrong thing,
Hmm. I, I
right?
I
So
love
yeah.
I love that I love that notion, and I think it really boils down to the notion of what's your why, and if you can define your why clearly, and why is just another way to say objective, um, you will be able to navigate not only areas of ambiguity, but you'll be able to get to your outcome that much more efficiently. And so it's funny because I think scaling businesses often fall into the exact trap that you're going to. It's a gunslinging period. Something I'll call quote unquote catastrophic happens within the business. And the reaction, and it's a reaction, is to say we need to standardize everything, put in all this sort of infrastructure, and we need to make sure that we are moving widgets down the path. And depending on the industry, and I want to caveat this, that makes sense in certain industries. So if we're making airplanes, we don't want to give the operator the leeway to decide how the wing is attached, right? But in a creative setting, or a place where there is an area where we can have more flexibility, giving that level of autonomy not only helps generate new ideas, but it also helps build the accountability within the people, because those people then feel like, wow, I own this particular outcome, and I'm going to build systems and structures that facilitate that. And maybe I'm going to find a new way, going back to that learning channel that you were talking about before. It's like, hey, if I'm being compensated not on doing my job, but the outcome associated to it, like my interest in getting feedback from people so I can get to that outcome that much more efficiently gets so much more heightened.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
The Yeah, it's interesting. I love the fact that you brought up ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone in the company, or multiple someones in a company, saying, "Hey, I own that," because
Mm-hmm.
that was another cultural piece that we had to correct also, because we fell into the fundamental attribution error trap, And for the less kind of social psychology nerds, fundamental attribution error is effectively, if I caused the problem, it's because of external factors. The traffic, the whatever, the internet, the Wi-Fi was bad. If someone else caused that same problem, it's because they're lazy. They don't care about this, or you attribute some type of a personality thing, and you infer their intent, right? Culturally, we had that issue going where if an outcome was an issue, it was always, oh, because the process, because it was the process, as opposed to going, wait a second, let's look at the players and the process, everything through and through, and that's the one piece. So the ownership part is so vital to all of this, driving it forward, especially to your point, if you're in like a non high safety, high risk concern area and high compliance area, like, I don't know, pharmaceuticals and like surgeries and airlines or just airplanes in general. Now, because true ownership, which is so cool to see, is when someone goes, hey boss, listen, I really want to own this thing. If it goes up in flames, I'll own it. But if it works out super well, let's get excited. Both sides of the coin, like true ownership, right? So it's not like I'm gonna get credit when it works out well, but if it doesn't work out, let's just squirrel it away and never talk about it and pretend it never happened. Let's move on to the next thing. But for them to wear that and then share it as a learning, we tend to call like sunshine your learnings, to actually sunshine it in the learning channel, to go, hey, this thing that I was so passionate about became a complete garbage fire. Here's the before, here's after, here's why, here's what I learned. Hopefully you can steal some stuff for this too. This is what I'm gonna try like next go around. It's so awesome to see when people do that.
It's one of my favorite things. Like, and I don't know if you're a Jocko fan. I'm hearing some Jocko come out. If you don't know who Jocko is, for the listeners, Jocko is a person who talks about extreme ownership. A spectacular book that he has out there. A lot of content on the socials as well too. But what I think it's important for the listeners to know and understand is that doesn't just happen by itself, and it takes the person at the top saying that it's okay to fail for people to actually want to showcase, not even that it's okay to fail, that learning, it's not even, failure is the wrong word, that learning is celebrated, and within the definition of learning, you have to fail to be able to see what works and what doesn't work. And so you've clearly made it a safe enough space with your organization to say, hey, this is where I take full ownership of this thing. I tried this thing out. It didn't work. Here's what I'm going to do differently. And this is the learning. Like, that behavior is going to create faster Kaizen, going back to the word that you used earlier, faster continuous improvement. And so I guess one of the things I want to clarify is, how did you get to the point where you had that mindset shift? Was it with the partnership that you had with the Lean Institute that helped bring this sort of concept to you? Or have you always been okay with people, as long as they take accountability, learning by doing and learning from their failures and sharing those over time?
Yeah, I always believed in it. In a different life, I was a fireman for 2.5 years because in Singapore, you have to serve your country when you're a male and turn 18. And I got drafted into the fire service. So learn by doing is the only way you get to be a half decent fireman. Like, you don't get to sit there and watch YouTube videos all day. And in another life, also, I used to like fight for a living, right? I was a Thai boxer. And same kind of deal. You can't just like watch UFC for a year and then just step into the octagon and be like, hell yeah, I'm gonna smash this guy. Learn by doing is the only way, and getting like beat down a lot is the only way. Also, even when you're training for a fight, you train in compromised positions. You don't just train in a position of power. Sometimes your starting position is one of your back is against the cage or the ring, and you start the training there so you know how to respond to those things. So I knew that in my early career. For some reason, I just never connected those dots at Right Hook for a while there. Um, but it definitely was. I think Lean gave me the language for how to and the framework to translate that into a knowledge work setting
Hmm.
where not everyone is a combat sports fan or practitioner, so you can speak that same language, and they understand it. And not everyone is like in as a first responder. We actually have another first responder on the team, Stephanie. Shout out, how you doing? Canada Coast Guard.
Love that.
So yeah, um, the learning by doing, and to your point, it really is about learning and learning not by the conventional corporate, learning day, which is you sit down and you just like get fed a whole bunch of information into your eyes and into your ears. That's not
Hmm.
learning. That's consuming information.
Hmm.
Like you only learn when you're able to do that thing. When I'm saying I'm learning to drive, it's not watching YouTube videos how to drive. I can actually
You got to
drive,
do it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So same type of a deal. So and the best way I found to start making that happen, like coming from the top wasn't just a directive thing. Coming from the top was me going into those channels, embracing the suck and sharing quote unquote failed projects and my
Hmm.
learnings from that, so that everyone can be like, oh, wait a second, he's like not some guy that we put up on a pedestal that has all the answers and knows all the stuff because he happens to be CEO. It's like, no, I like that's not just a recommendation. This is an expectation. Like
Hmm.
everyone, none of us are immune to stretching and moving into areas where you happen to suck at something because you've never done it before,
Hmm.
and you get learnings out of it. The only way to have done something before is to do it before. Like,
I appreciate that so much, and I find that even, and I know we want to realize that we're not talking about the Amazons of the world in these type of conversations, but I think the companies that have grown the fastest and have the largest market caps in the world are some of the best innovators in the world and didn't get hampered down by bureaucracy process. They focused on the outcome and they were okay with iterating over time. And they knew that it's less about being perfect all the time and it's more about realizing that one win can cover 20 losses because of the upside associated to that. And so if we start investing our learnings like venture capital firms and realize that like nine out of 10 of these companies are going to go bust, but one of them is going to pop off 100x, like absolutely we're going to make that bet every single time. And I think that should be the same case for every listener organization that's participating in this. I do want to ask, as you look at comm scaling and you look at the intensity of the organization, how did you go about trying to match those things and ensuring that you as a leader were not outpacing or underpacing what has been established within the organization?
yeah, for sure. Um, the I love that you're asking this question because for the most part, P&Ls grow in a fairly linear fashion, right?
Sure.
So we plot out like we're seeking 30% year on year growth, 50% year on year
Mm-hmm.
growth, 200% year on year growth, whatever it might be. Um, Humans somehow tend to move, uh, based on my observation at least, in more of a like step function. So they typically go like that, have some type of breakthrough, and then go like that. It's not an
Mm-hmm.
upward curve for the most part. For the
Mm-hmm.
most part, and this is a very broad stroke statement here. So, um, that's where I found a lot. I coach a fair few founders as well, and the difficulty is they'll find themselves either, to your point, underpacing because the demands are here, but they're still stuck at BAU because that's what got them to this point over here. And they go, well, if I keep doing this, I'm going to be okay. And they need to
Mm-hmm.
find that breakthrough. Or they're overpacing, they're frustrated because everyone else isn't keeping up, and they turn into that asshole boss, right?
Sure.
So, and the core thing that they forget is uh, that's where team goal setting, company goal setting, OKRs are a great framework for that to then go, what is the 3-year revenue and profit goal and all the other stuff that comes with that. Let's decompose that down to 1 year. Let's decompose that down to the quarter. The only difference is I'm not going to do it as a solo exercise, myself as the founder, and maybe like my co-founder, two of us, and then we set this target without talking to anyone, and then just like announce that to the company and go like, all right, everyone just hit that target. But we
Yep.
also don't run it like via consensus either, where it's like, oh, I want everyone to feel good about this, and how do
Mm-hmm.
y'all feel, and kumbaya, this son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And lean really taught me that, right? One of the principles of lean is genchi genbutsu, or go to the gemba. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, go to the factory floor and actually talk to the people who are doing the work, and it will give you real life data of what is achievable
Mm-hmm.
and where certain gaps are.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, overpace or underpace as a founder or as an executive relative to the company, like how do you attenuate that? Well, this is just attenuating your expectations, overpacing or
Mm-hmm.
underpacing. This right here is just attenuating the organization's expectations. So by
Sure.
setting company goals and department goals that feed up into the company goals at a certain level, you can then go, well, how much of this is grounded in what we understand of the output of the organization today? How much of it is extrapolated out because we're aiming to improve the output of the organization tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we apply some type of time scale against that?
I like the connection. And my follow-on question becomes, if you're trying to match and you're trying to manage expectations, I mean, this whole idea of calibration based off of the organization's ability, I think is so important. How how have you known that you're succeeding in the application of this mindset and this framework? And the reason why I ask that is I think in many organizations it's common for a founder or CEO to say, hey, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, X, Y, and Z. And to go get feedback, try to go get feedback from the organization. And most of the people in an organization are nodding when they're in front of the founder, but then when they go to the you go to the Slack channel chatter, it's going back and
Right.
forth like, what the hell is this? Are you kidding me? This is impossible. We're never going to achieve this. So
Yeah.
I think often leaders sometimes operate in a vacuum because the people don't want to bite the hand that's feeding them, not realizing that it. And I will caveat this with, it's the leader's responsibility to make it a safe space to talk about failures, to push back, to bring up these all the things that you've already talked about. Like that's almost table stakes for this system to work. But like,
Yeah.
how have you verified that this is working for your business and that you're getting the feedback loop on what you're cascading down?
Yeah, for sure. So, um, number one is, of course, looking at the hard data to go, are we hitting targets across
Mm-hmm.
whatever dimensions that we're measuring against, revenue, sales, net profit, etc. Um, the human element, though, instead of polling for a are you bought in or not, which is a binary answer, yes or no, go in for the contextual answer, right?
Mm.
So, oh, okay, that's really interesting. So how do you think we're going to be able to get there?
Hmm.
So just enter that conversation, be like, hey, so in your realm of responsibility, how do you think we're going to be able to get there? And how does this roll up to, the next layer up those targets, right? So for this large target to work, these departments have to generate this much in sales or this many new customers or this much lift. Okay, well, within those departments, there are certain teams. So these teams need to be operating at this level to roll up to that, to roll up to that. So based on what I just described to you, how do you think your little team in here, and maybe other teams, you might have tips for them as well. How do you see this working? So
Hmm.
involve them in that thought process. Um, it is then allows for me to get and going in with genuine curiosity, even in my tone and my inflections and all that, and the way I show up on that call, as opposed to like, so tell me, how do you intend it's going to work? It's like, yo, that's exactly how you're going to get fed, like what you want to hear, not what you're supposed to
Sure.
hear.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go in with genuine curiosity and go, so yeah, so how do you think this is going to tease out? Like, do you see stuff in your day to day that is blocking us from being able to get there, or
Mm.
blocking just your team from being able to get there? Like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Having a conversation like that allows for um, minimizing faulty data, because it's no longer like a yep, yes, boss.
I appreciate getting away from the idea or knowledge grenades being thrown over the wall, right? And actually sitting down with the people and really digging in. I think you can gauge a level of authenticity on what's being shared and really get to the core of the outcomes that we're driving towards. And this whole notion of comp scaling, I think, is so palatable. And you've given so many action steps for all the listeners to be able to apply in their day to day. Before we get ready to wrap up, there's two questions I'd like to ask every speaker that's on. One of them is, what are you most excited about looking into the future? And that could be personal, that could be business. Go ahead.
As cliche as it sounds, I'm excited about where this AI thing is going. As cliche as it sounds for this moment, right? Like November 2025. Let's timestamp this son of a bitch. November 2025. I have no clue. There are a bunch of tech optimists out there. There are a bunch of like sky is falling doomsayers out there also. But like we were chatting just before we hit record, the future is now. It's wild out there.
Truly.
So I'm excited about that.
I couldn't agree with you more. There's so much upside that we can't even conceive what the possibilities are with what's coming out.
Pure alpha, just pure alpha.
Pure alpha. And then the other question is, if you could go back 10 years from today and meet your younger self, what advice would you give to yourself?
Ooh. It is very okay to state your needs. I think that's it.
You put both fists up at the same time. So for both listeners that were listening in and not watching the video, you put both fists up at the same time. What's the meaning behind that? Give me some context there.
I think it wasn't so much about the fist, but more so like creating that space, right? To it's very okay to state your needs because great relationships come out of all parties involved having their needs met. And I have been in and also observed multiple business relationships, especially where because of a perceived power dynamic, usually the one who is perceived to be lower on the power dynamic, one down on the power dynamic, tend to go like, oh, it's okay if I give up some of these needs or not state them, or say, you know what, whatever they state their needs are, I will just feed into that. It never goes well. Like that train will always get derailed. So to have that upfront conversation, or at least at any point to disrupt that relationship and go, hey, actually, you know what, times have changed, or situations have changed, or I've come to a realization that I have not been voicing what the needs are here, right? So is there a way that we can have those needs be mutually met and beneficial?
I always say to my spouse that I'm not a mind reader, and you got to say what you need, right? You got to establish those things, and I actually say that to the team members that I lead and work with as well, which is this whole notion that we can't have optimal outcomes unless there is transparency. And so you gotta talk about what that is. I really appreciate that call out. Dee, it's been spectacular having you on today's conversation. You gave all sorts of frameworks and details that I know the listeners are going to get so much value from. And man, I'm excited to continue to see how you scale Right Hook, and hope to have you on a future podcast.
Absolutely. Would be happy to come back anytime. Thank you for having me. You are an amazing dance partner in the podcast world. This was super fun.
I appreciate you, man. That's it for this episode of The Scaling Paradox. If this helped cut through the chaos, please send it to another founder or operator that's stuck in it too. If you haven't subscribed yet, let's fix that. New episodes of The Scaling Paradox drop every other Thursday. There's no filler in this podcast, just the real work of scaling past yourself.